Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley speaking from Washington, D.C. It is May 1st, May Day. It is the International Festival of Labor, which we salute. And, of course, this is all made in USA, right? This is all directly from the U.S. and then abandoned here by the reactionaries and the reactionary consensus, but still living on just about everywhere else in the world. And maybe these May days of this current phase are getting to be a bit more serious and more robust than the recent ones. Let's try to talk about some quick themes. We've only got about 2 segments worth of news and analysis because we're gonna hopefully take you to Moscow and then a series of other guests. Right, we're about 1 week away from the British election campaign. We're a couple of weeks away from the campaigns inside the U.S. Right, the domestic ones. So let's talk about a couple of things. First of all, among the various military exercises, which one should you fear? Which one should you be concerned about? Two alternatives. Is it, for example, Jade Helm, which is supposed to be the globalists and the black helicopters coming to take over Texas and New Mexico and Arizona and Southern California? Is it going to be Cloven Bundy? Is he going to be out there defending us against the globalists and the black helicopters? I think this is absurd. This is indeed fear porn. What you ought to be worried about, clear and present danger, it's called Operation Fearless Guardian. Mark it well. Operation Fearless Guardian. This is ongoing. This is real. This is explosive. This is 300 U.S. Special Forces, paratroopers, special troops that are training the Ukrainian fascist Soldateska. That is the Ukrainian army, bad as they are, and, of course, the various fascist paramilitary militias and Freikorps and so forth. And that's going on from Lvov in the west all the way over to Mariupol, and I'm sure very far into the east. I would bet that there are U.S. troops now on the soil of the 2 new independent countries, the Lugansk People's Republic and the Donetsk People's Republic, because they don't hold all of their territory. So there are now U.S. intruders on those areas. So that's what I would say. Forget about Jade Helm. Jade Helm is a sideshow. Jade Helm may well be a diversion to take your attention away from the one that really counts. Because it's clear to me that the one that really counts is Operation Fearless Guardian. Shut it down. Tell Obama, tell Ashton Carter, hey, Ash, time to cut out the Operation Fearless Guardian. Now we're going to have the anniversary of the victory of the Allies over Nazi Germany on May 8th in the West and May 9th in the East. And May 9th is the big one because that was the largest single bilateral military engagement. It's actually multilateral, but in human history. And we salute the contribution of the Soviet Union, the Soviet peoples, the Russian people among them, and all the rest. And we condemn any attempt to dirty up the U.S. record. Remember, the United States has one good thing. Never an alliance with Hitler, never. And never the call to appease Hitler that you got from Britain and France, right? We go back to the quarantine speech and the rattlesnakes of the sea, as President Roosevelt put it at the time. Now, as I mentioned, we are about 1 week from the British election, and we've, of course, got our man Stuart Hooper that we hope to hear from later in the broadcast over there in Essex. But here's the idea. Weimarization is going on apace. The fragmentation, the weakening, the hollowing out, flattening of the British political system, right? A long time ago, you could choose between the Tories, the Conservatives, and Labour, and that was it. But now we've got, God knows, UKIP, UK Independence Party, racist. Don't vote for them. You're a racist if you vote for UKIP. That is called scapegoating. That's saying, oh, the world economic crisis of 2008 was caused by some terrified illegal aliens. And again, I still don't understand why, if you're in Calais, you're willing to risk your life to get to the British side of that coast. I just don't get it. Somebody please tell me, what is it that makes the British side of that better than the French side? If you look at the social services, I think you'll find that there's a terrible mass delusion going on. Anyway, UKIP, that's this guy Farage, rhymes with garbage or other things. The Liberal Democrats, these traitors, right? The people who were going to keep education free and who then turned around and started charging heavy-duty tuition for education as the price of their deal with Cameron because they wanted to get into power. The Lib Dems have lost more than half of their support. So gaining at their expenses UKIP and then this Welsh entity, the Plaid Cymru, and the Scottish National Party. They're both up at about 5%. And the Green Party at 4%. So here's the idea. This is my argument, another argument why you should vote for Stuart Hooper if you can. Wall Street Journal, Friday, today. Disgruntled UK voters rally to small parties. May 7th election could deny either Labour or Conservatives an outright majority. So quite possibly a hung parliament or a multi-party coalition, the very unstable kind. Okay, so that's the situation. If you're in Britain, help Stuart Hooper. Come on out, volunteer for him. Pass out some leaflets. Go to this area in Essex and help him to campaign. And we'll give you the coordinates later on here. Now, free trade and the Bernie Sanders candidacy. Now, Bernie Sanders is coming forward supposedly as the alternative to Hillary Clinton on the left, right? Because of the pusillanimous failure of Elizabeth Warren to do anything for a country which is in deep trouble like this one, we get Bernie Sanders. Now, Bernie Sanders has some positive qualities, but I'm afraid he is not what he's pretending to be these days. Bernie Sanders really does not have a clear program. They had the front page of the Washington Post today suggests that Bernie is looking to attack the billionaire class, and this is you can obviously see why many would sympathize with this. And it's not that it's wrong. It's just that we're likely to get one attempt with this stuff. One more chance before fascism comes down. Look at it that way. Bernie, you've got one more chance, so you better give it everything you've got. And it doesn't look to me like you are. So he's talking the billionaire class. Washington Post headline, Sanders takes aim at the billionaire class. The problem with that is that's not where the money is. The money is in the Wall Street zombie banks and the Wall Street hedge fund hyenas. Those institutions. And the way you get that money is not to attack the income of someone. Well, you can obviously attack the income of the super rich, but you'll see that doesn't give you the money you need. You've got to go for the Wall Street sales tax, 1% on their turnover, on everything they buy and sell. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. Once again, very busy program. So Bernie Sanders claims to be the alternative. Now, the problem is he does not have a real program. One of the papers today quotes that he wants to be a revolutionary. Well, I'm sorry. That's not revolutionary. raising the minimum wage is a great demand. We're all for it, 1,000%. But that will not by itself transform the entire system, nor will these other things. You can tax bankers as individuals more or less. You have not changed the institutional pattern of the system. The Wall Street sales tax is something quite different. That shifts the power relations, and it also begins to put the hand of government regulation and the government treasury into the pockets, not just of individuals, but of banks, and breaking the power of banks as distinct from individuals here and there is what is crucial. So revolutionary demands, remember, are reforms that seem to be perfectly normal and perfectly reasonable to the average person in the afflicted breakdown society, but which at the same time represent a qualitative change that alters the entire dynamic and structure of that society. In other words, a revolution. So revolutionary is the 1% Wall Street sales tax and seizing the Federal Reserve. Bernie does not say anything about the Federal Reserve as far as I can tell. Not a word, not a mumbling word from Bernie on that critical question of the Federal Reserve. Now, there is, of course, a structural effect, which we cannot leave unmentioned. According to Charles Lane, I think reactionary, in the Washington Post yesterday, Thursday, April 30th, the likely effect and intent of a Sanders challenge is to push both the Clinton campaign and her administration to the left, thus consolidating what this guy calls liberal control of the party. This liberal and conservative is a colossal mystification. When I look at that, I say, well, if he's a little wheel attached to her big wheel, how about another still smaller wheel that pulls Bernie further to the left towards actual revolutionary change? I would have some ideas about how to do that. I'm going to think about that a lot, right? How an effort to the left of Sanders could actually make that into a kind of a conveyor belt that would take things like the Wall Street sales tax and seizing the Fed and putting that mainstream, right? Confronting Madame Clinton and her money bags and all the rest of it. The other thing is a couple of other ones. Free trade. Oh, Bernie, you're against free trade. That's great. But what are you against? Are you against the fast track? I'm against the fast track. How about against the free trade bill itself? I'm not sure you are. I am. I am against the free trade bill, and I'll go you one better, as Harold Meyerson wrote in the Washington Post yesterday. I'll go you one better, Bernie. 15% protective tariff. 15%. We've got to build a wall behind which we can rebuild industries, living standards, unions, and other elements of anti-financier power. Bernie wants to increase Social Security pension. Fine. Again, taxing the rich. Taxing the rich is okay. It creates certain political problems, but the main thing is tax the banks, tax Wall Street, as they asked Willie Sutton. Why? Because that's where the money is. Now, the British, we've done. We've also noticed that the Republican reactionaries have passed their House of Representatives austerity genocide budget for the coming year. We're going to try to get it. Most of the press coverage refuses to tell you the genocidal killer cuts that the Republicans are wreaking on the American people. So they're running interference, right? They don't want you to realize how fascist those guys are. But the other question then is Baltimore. Now, we've just had the Baltimore District Attorney, State's Attorney Mosby announced that there would be serious charges, including one second-degree murder charge against the 6 cops in the incident involving Freddie West. So here's what I would say about this entire thing. On the narrow question about these charges, I think this is statesmanlike in the sense that it is imperative that we break away from this pattern of white cop kills black victim and gets off scot-free. That won't work. That is not. It's not possible to maintain public order at this point, right? We've had the police, unfortunately, running wild for many years, and now it's time to change that. And, of course, we'd also want to examine the interplay between reactionary Republican political machines and these wayward cops. But the deterrent effect of that on many racist policemen, I think, will be considerable. I wonder, what were these guys thinking? Don't you realize you're in a big upheaval about this issue, and you go ahead with arrogance and impudence and have this guy not treated and then killed? No, this is impossible. So there's been some skepticism about the charges. Limbaugh had some guy who said that the charges are not really all going to be fought, right? That they're kind of a beginning salvo, and eventually the charges will be reduced. I think there's plenty of basis for those charges. So these guys now, as a lot of these reactionaries are fond of saying, you'll get your day in court. Fine. They get their day in court. And remember that the starting point of this is that the Maryland medical examiner, not the Baltimore DA, the Maryland medical examiner said this was a homicide. So at that point, if it's a homicide, then some charges. The other thing we have to remember is there is no confidence left in the grand jury process. The grand jury process is going to have to be reformed or dumped or something like this, because the old saying used to be a grand jury will indict a ham sandwich. And now we see it will also not indict a killer with the blood dripping off his hands. That will be found to be something completely benign. And now we're also hearing the reactionary saying, yeah, but this Mosby, she was very close to the family. Well, that guy in Ferguson was so close to the police department. What are we kidding? Turnabout is fair play. Sauce for the goose, sauce for the gander. It's all based on reciprocity. But the big issue is this. Jobs. We had this London Independent, and you can actually see it perhaps even better in the daily briefing of the Tax Wall Street Party. The place has 52% unemployment. We need 10 million new jobs for people out of work. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley reporting from Washington, D.C. Now, as we mentioned already at the beginning of the program, it is May 1st. It is International Labor Day. This is when the working people are supposed to feel their oats. And we have reports that the Greek finance minister, Varoufakis, was certainly, I think, the only finance minister to go out and take part in the demonstrations of the working people. And that happened in Athens already earlier today. But don't let me take the time. Let's give the floor to Michael Chiotinis, our excellent and time-tested correspondent in Athens. Michael, welcome.
Hello, Webster. And that's true. He went out there and he took part in the this whole demonstrations. Now, first of all, let me remind our listeners where things are at the moment in Greece. In February 20th, as you remember, Greece and its European partners, lenders or institutions, supposedly arrived at an agreement. They set a plan for a short-term deal. Why short-term? Because between the left government in Greece and its partners in Europe, as you can imagine, the difference of opinion on economic policy is huge. So, the very moderate and good-willing Greek finance minister, Varoufakis, we just mentioned him, he said, let's start with whatever it is we can agree on and leave the harder stuff for later down the line, when we will have built some trust between us. So since then, since February 20th, they've been working on the specifics of this short-term deal and on a basis for a mid-term agreement. Let me do a quick note here. We'll never say that a long-term agreement is struck until the issue of debt restructuring is addressed. Now, where are we now? Negotiations for the specifics of even this short-term deal haven't yet arrived anywhere. They can't agree. Time is running against Greece because the European Central Bank has effectively freezed liquidity for Greek banks under technical excuses already early in February. And the Greek economy is being strangled. This brings us to the inescapable conclusion that the prolonged duration of these negotiations, it's been more than 3 months now, is something absolutely intended. It's not an accident. I don't believe it's an accident. Nor we can blame it on the Greek government. In fact, Alexis Tsipras said very clearly in an interview this week that the only reasons we don't have a deal yet is because the institutions insist on things like deeper cuts in pensions, an increase in the value-added tax, a regressive tax, forgetting the planned ban on foreclosures. They want huge budget surpluses and the rest of it. So this stall by itself is an attempt by the lender institutions to strangle the Greek economy and thus blackmail the Greek government to make concessions. The clear picture is that they don't want to have an agreement. They want to have the Greek government surrender to austerity policies. And we're not talking about reversal of austerity here. For starters, we're talking avoiding even deeper austerity. Now, there are two important things that need to be stressed regarding the goals of the lender institutions in this process of negotiations. Number one, their only goal is to humiliate the Greek government politically and continue imposing the same policy as if elections were never held. And number two, in order to do that, they are trying to get rid of Varoufakis. Varoufakis is a very annoying opponent to have because he's extremely qualified and understands the economics better than almost anyone of his colleagues in the Eurogroup of finance ministers. And he's more people-friendly than they can tolerate, more of a populist, if you like.
Right.
After the Eurogroup in Riga, Latvia, in which Varoufakis was impudently, let me say, bullied by the other Euro area finance minister, he tweeted the famous phrase by Franklin Roosevelt from his 1936 re-election campaign: "They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred."
It's actually the forces of organized money are unanimous in their hatred, and I welcome their hatred. I also noticed that, I think I mentioned last week, the Italian edition of Huffington Post, the whole front page was completely a diatribe against Varoufakis. They were playing with him as some kind of a jet-set glamour boy, but then it turns out that he's more serious, and now they've all turned against him. They're all screaming that Varoufakis must go. So he must be doing something right.
Yes, of course. You may have heard something like Varoufakis is out of the picture also.
Right,
and
that Tsipras has taken over.
Yes, let me say that's not true. It's pure propaganda. Prime Minister Tsipras made internal changes having to do with the coordination of the negotiating team, and that's it. Varoufakis is still in charge of negotiating policy, and by all means still a finance minister. So why do they hate him so much? I need to say something, maybe not as important for international affairs, because after all, we're talking about Greece, a small, insignificant economy. But this may increase the morale of common people disillusioned with politics. I was standing here yesterday in Athens, Greece, listening to my government's finance minister talking about the need to outlaw naked credit default swaps. Specifically, addressing the parliament, he said, the lender institutions are telling us about the moral hazard of stopping foreclosures, because then even those who have the ability to service their mortgages will have the incentive to stop paying because they will be immune to foreclosure. And they don't care about people being thrown out of their homes. Why, instead, are we not talking about the moral hazard of naked credit default swaps? And
absolutely. And on an institutional basis, you can ask Schäuble about this, because Schäuble banned them temporarily in Germany in the summer of 2010. That's the so-called Leerverkäufer, right?
Yes.
Naked credit default swaps.
He said that naked credit default swaps are essentially like someone being able to get fire insurance against his neighbor's house, giving him an incentive to want to see his neighbor's house burned. He said, we need to ban this kind of instruments internationally, but we can start by banning them in Europe. And for now, we will seriously consider banning them in Greece symbolically to make the issue public. He also said, and that's the start, because credit default swaps are one of the least toxic derivatives out there. He said that in Parliament. So I hope people can feel that politics is not a dead end. We shouldn't be nihilists. And I hope they can also see why Varoufakis is personally being attacked by elites and puppet politicians. And also maybe why he was cowardly attacked by anarchists while dining with his wife in that restaurant in downtown Athens. I don't know if you've heard about that.
No, we need the details. What happened?
Some anarchists went into the restaurant and threw things against the wall. The goal of this attack was to provoke him to call the police, I think, which would then lead to the usual clashes between anarchists and the police, making this a news item worldwide, humiliate and pressure the Greek government, or create an atmosphere that the Greek government is unpopular in some way. Right. Now, one last thing I would like to add is that, as we learned yesterday, this is breaking news, the Supreme Administrative Court of Greece has ruled that cuts in pensions are unconstitutional.
Good. Excellent. All right, Michael, that's a very interesting report. We'll see you again next week on World Crisis Radio. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley reporting once again from Washington, D.C. Now, we are joined by a very distinguished and highly interesting guest, and that is Stanislav Byshok of Moscow. And I just have to briefly say how I got to know Stanislav Byshok. During that Europa Objektiv tour of the Donetsk areas, they had a day of very interesting briefings and discussions set up in Moscow at the building which houses the Civic Forum, the Civic Chamber of the Russian Federation. And one of the speakers that had been invited was Stanislav Byshok, along with his colleague Alexei Kochetov, and they are authors of what I think is one of the most important books in the world at this point, and that is called Neo-Nazis and Euromaidan, From Democracy to Dictatorship. And this is a study of this tremendous problem which threatens every person in the world, and that is Ukrainian fascism. The fascism and neo-Nazism which has taken over Kiev and that army and their militia forces, their Freikorps. Let me just say a couple of more words about Stanislav Byshok. He is a psychologist. In other words, he can approach these questions from, I think, one of the most important angles. How do these people think? Why do they do what they do? He's a writer, graduate of Moscow State University. He's a political analyst currently working for the International Election Monitoring Organization, EMO, of the Commonwealth of Independent States, which is the group that was formed then among the countries which had been part of the Soviet Union. And he's author, this is actually his second book on this complex. He's got an earlier book also on the threat to democracy in Ukraine, from democracy to dictatorship. So Stanislav Byshok, welcome. We're delighted to have you. And maybe you start by telling us, just giving us the general thesis of your book, Neo-Nazis and Euromaidan.
Yeah. Hi, America. It's a pleasure to be here with you and at the same time here in Moscow. Yes, the subtitle of my book, of our book, From Democracy to Dictatorship, it's a reverse of the well-known book by Gene Sharp called From called from dictatorship to democracy, because the thing is, the thing we have seen in Ukraine through the past year and a half is this it's this turmoil which brought much more dictatorial, much more brutal forces than that had been ruling Ukraine before them. So it's the paradox, let's say so, that this coup led eventually not from dictatorship to democracy, but from a democracy, or let's say more or less democratic society, to the dictatorial, to the brutal society, which is divorced by, which is devastated by war and by inner conflicts.
And that's, I think, very accurate. I hope you've had a chance to take a look at that book that we did here, Obama, the Postmodern Coup, The Making of a Manchurian Candidate. We've got a whole thing in there about Gene Sharp and Colonel Robert Helvey, and that's, of course, the Albert Einstein Institute. So I think our listeners know pretty much the Gene Sharp story, but how about these fascist and Nazi groups in Ukraine? And I hope you can always help us to understand, how do they think? Why do they do what they do? Because these are very strange people, right? So in certain ways, we haven't seen this since 1945 or something like that. So give us your insights, please.
The first time I encountered this with this group of people was in 2012, when I was part of the international election monitoring mission to Ukraine, where they had parliamentary election, and this time in 2012, for the first time in the history of Ukraine, there are openly neo-Nazi and Russophobic party Svoboda, which means freedom. Paradoxically, it entered parliament, and it gained more than 10% of votes. And so I came up with an idea to study this party more closely, their ideology, their roots, and their history, because this party, this Svoboda party, before 2012, it had been a somewhat marginal force, made up of former skinheads and other, this kind of subculture linked people, and
hooligans. Can we say hooligans?
Yeah, absolutely. And before 2004, this party had been called Social Nationalist Party of Ukraine, social nationalist, which means National Socialist.
National Socialist.
Yes, but they just changed the words, from one to another. And so, as I studied their history and their ideology, I also studied the Ukrainian history books, and the books children learn a history of Ukraine in schools and in universities. And you know what? I was surprised, and I was surprised, but not pleasantly, to learn that the ideology of the radical nationalist ultra-Nazi party Svoboda, and the things I had written in the history books, in the history books of modern Ukraine, appeared to be somewhat the same. I mean, I found out that the national struggle between the Russians and Ukrainians began in the middle of the 12th century. Yes, 12th century, and it never stops. until the present days, and all the history of Ukraine, or of this territory which is now known as Ukraine. It was somewhat an years and hundreds of years of struggle between Ukrainians and Russians. And moreover, I found out that well, it sounds ridiculous, but it's there. It's in the books that the very name Russia or Rus and Russians, the Muscovites stole from the Ukrainians during the reign of Peter the Great. And so that's why the Ukrainians, who are true Russians, had to rename themselves and call themselves Ukrainian, just not to be confused with this Northern Empire. It's ridiculous, but it's the nowadays it's the official approach of Ukrainian historical science, and it's the official approach of the government of the people of Ukraine since independence, since 1991. And so there are a lot of people in Russia nowadays who blame President Poroshenko for his attempts to rewrite history.
Hang on just 1 second. That's our hard break. But we'll be right back for another segment with Stanislav Byshok, the author of Neo-Nazis and Euromaidan, Democracy to Dictatorship, Gene Sharp in Reverse. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C., and we are continuing a very interesting conversation with Stanislav Byshok, who is the author of a very interesting and I think very timely book, Neo-Nazis and Euromaidan, From Democracy to Dictatorship. We were just going through the, I guess these are high school textbooks, which reduce Ukrainian history into a caricature. In other words, a complete myth about Ukraine being the enemy of Russia and so forth. So this is not my specialty as a historian, but I know enough to say this is absolute baloney. It's just not true. Just a couple of other things, though, Stanislav, concerning the Svoboda Party, right? Oleg Tyanibok seems to be the head of this. Now, we noticed that when Victoria Nuland was talking about who she wanted in the government, she wanted Yatsenyuk in the government, but she didn't really want Klitschko, and Tyanibok didn't even get mentioned. Has Tyanibok been put in the closet to keep him out of the media? And then what would be the relation of this other guy, Yarosh, who is now, we saw Yarosh join the national command structure, and then a series of murders have taken place in Kiev, starting with the regime opponent Kalashnikov, I think his name was.
The problem with Tyanibok was that he had been too well known, even to the Wiesenthal Foundation, for his anti-Semitic rhetoric. So sure, they decided to put him in the closet. However, the very ideology of Svoboda Party, of openly Russophobic and neo-Nazi stance, now it is the dominant ideology of Ukraine as a state, and these textbooks, they had been rewritten, so to speak, long before the coup took place. They had been rewritten in 1991. And so that's why the new generation of Ukrainians who claim to be patriots, and European-minded people, they don't know any other history any other from what they have learned in schools and in universities, and that's the problem. And coming to Dmitry Yarosh, who is the leader of right sector paramilitary group, he used to be in the comment of now the head of the security service of Ukraine, Valentin Nalyvaichenko. Valentin Nalyvaichenko used to be a MP, and Dmitry Yarosh, leader of right sector, was his subordinate, and and he is now. So the thing is that the right-wing, the military right-wing factions have been subordinate and have been controlled by the security service of Ukraine for years now, and it's not a secret. It's the open information. Everybody knew it and everybody knows it, but surprisingly, especially in the West, this information is appears to be, not very interesting. Well, it doesn't matter. What matters is Russian aggression, annexation of Crimea, and all these things, and nobody seems to care about the ideology which drove this coup, about the ideology of today's Ukraine, and I think it's well, for me it's a threatening sign. Let's say it's ominous. It's bad omen that people people are aware, or they believe they are aware of Russian aggressiveness, but they don't know. They know nothing about Ukraine and about Ukrainian ideology nowadays.
Just on this question of the Ukrainian intelligence services, during the tour that I was fortunate enough to take, we heard a number of people saying that the Western intelligence agencies, I guess the CIA, MI6, people like this, had penetrated and taken over large parts of the Ukrainian intelligence apparatus, and that when they were, for example, the Gene Sharp people were holding these camps, right? They had 20 or 30,000 people indoctrinated, essentially brainwashed in these camps. One participant said he went to the Ukrainian intelligence and tried to tell them to stop it, and they said, no, don't worry. Another one of our discussion partners said there were anti-state parts of the Ukrainian intelligence that wanted this Maidan coup to occur.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And moreover, I'd like to add that the head of security service of Ukraine, Valentin Nalyvaichenko, used to work to have some practice in CIA. And it's not some secret information. It's on the table. And moreover, before the coup took place, Valentin Nalyvaichenko had been blamed by his own colleagues for working not for Ukrainian state but for the USA.
All right, then. Just one immediate point, because I think we'll have to have you back next month to get some more insights. But in terms of where this is all likely to be going, there are competing hypotheses. Some people say the federalization of Ukraine is one example, or some other solution. But the people that I was able to talk to in Donetsk all said there's nobody on the other side to cooperate with. Since the burning of the trade union house in Odessa on May 2nd, which killed hundreds and hundreds of people in fire, but also other forms of murder, that one gentleman said Ukraine has been dead since May 2nd of last year. Could you sort of give the view of circles in Moscow that you know of? Is that how the opinion is evolving?
Donetsk and Lugansk is one question, and the other parts of Ukraine is another question. I mean, I think that the only future for united Ukraine, I mean united, but maybe without these eastern parts, is a federation, because if they don't agree on federalization, I believe they will end up, having separate states, instead of the united Ukraine, or some parts of Ukraine which are, which are being controlled by Kiev nowadays. So I think it is either federalization or just dissolution of the state itself.
And if the dissolution would be presumably the Novorossiya part on the one side and then something else on the other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and let me just ask you one other question, right? Again, we want to have you back, but Moscow is getting ready for the Victory Day celebration. Can you tell us something about what that looks like?
Well, usually we have military parades in the Red Square.
Go ahead. We gotta wrap up. That's the end of our time.
Oh, yeah. So we have a military parade in the Red Square. We have a lot of patriotic billboards in our streets. We have a lot of patriotic and historical programs on TV, and people celebrate. People say thank you to the older people, to the veterans.
Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. Now, next Thursday is the British general election. The entire House of Commons is up for re-election or not. Now, let me just make 2 points. Yesterday, France 24 spent a lot of time on a bunch of joke candidates. I think this was actually a waste of time. But then again, today, the Wall Street Journal, the big headline is that the larger parties are not succeeding in getting anybody's interest, so that what you've got going on in Britain now is the smaller parties are getting the interest that the larger ones used to have, right? So that the total for the Tories, the Conservatives, and the Labour Party is going to be about 67%, 2/3 of the vote. But you've got, as we said before, UKIP is 12, Liberal Democrats 9, Scottish National Party 5, Plaid Cymru 5, Green 4. The headline here, disgruntled UK voters rally to small parties. Well, if you're looking for an independent candidate who actually is anti-austerity, that would be Stuart Hooper. And we're happy to have Stuart with us again right now. This is the last appearance, Stuart, before the election. So give us the grand summation of everything that people around the world and in Britain need to know.
Yes. Hi, Webster. Thanks for having me back on the show.
Absolutely.
And as you say, this is the last show before the election. Next time I'm on, we will have a result.
Next time you're going to be right honourable.
Yes, hopefully. So, do you want me to give a quick overview of the program?
Please do. And your debate there in London last week.
Yeah, I'll talk about that. Yeah. So the overall program, I'm framing it as a New Deal for Britain. So the main points are the following. So to rebuild infrastructure and industry, so we can bring back high skill and high wage jobs throughout the entire country. We also need free university education. This is something that Scotland manages to do, but for some reason England cannot. We need to really remove the financial burden of education. Along with that, we need to strengthen the NHS. Labour is saying that they want to protect the NHS. We need to go far further than that. We really need to make it a world leader in biomedical research and development and make it the best healthcare system in the world.
Absolutely. Very good.
We also need a living wage. So that would be £8 per hour today, not by 2020, which is what Labour is promoting, because you should not be working 40 hours a week and still be in poverty. That is ridiculous. And then overall, the programme aims to end austerity, so an immediate end to all public cuts that attack the most vulnerable people in our society. And how we pay for all this is by 1% City of London financial transaction tax. So we're taxing the big financial institutions that are responsible for the crisis, not individuals or small businesses. And we also can truly nationalise the Bank of England and use that to start bailing out the public instead of banks.
That's powerful. That's more content than I heard. I heard part of the debate of the three leaders, right? The Conservative, Labour, and Liberal Democrat. And this was a lot of fluff compared to that very solid program you just put out there. So congratulations.
Thank you, Webster. Yeah, they are always just on all issues that have no real consequence in the overall economic problems that we're facing.
How about that London debate?
Yeah, I was just going to go into that. So that was last night. I was invited onto a panel with my university tutors and professors. So that was very kind of them to allow me on there. That was the International Centre for Policy Studies at City University London. And it was a roundtable discussion on the British general election, and I got to give a 10-minute talk on my programme points there, obviously going into a lot more detail, and also everything that I've done so far in the campaign. And it went very well. I got very good feedback from both my professors and all my friends who attended. They said it went across really well. It was all recorded, so it will be up sometime next Tuesday. I'll get that to you so you can hopefully post it up where you can, Webster.
Absolutely, and we want to get it up before the vote. We got to get it up there so people can take stock.
Yeah, it should be Tuesday, so it should be right on time. There was a gentleman from Scotland in the audience who came up to me afterwards and said that the programme would work very well up in Scotland, which has faced a massive deindustrialisation.
That's right. It would be the industrial renaissance of a totally depressed area.
Yeah, so this overall programme would work incredibly well in the north of England, as well as Scotland, where all those big industries were lost. But overall, the event was a lot of fun. It was a great experience, and I'm really excited for everybody out there to be able to see it. And yeah, that should be up on Tuesday.
All right. Now, I bet there are people who want to volunteer for you in the critical last phase, who want to come around and ring doorbells and put leaflets under windows and put leaflets on the windshields of automobiles. And how can people contact you if they want to come down? Say, look, I'm over here in Bristol, or I'm here in Leeds, and I want to come down and help you for a few days.
Well, you would need to contact me through my Facebook page, which is Stuart Hooper for Parliament, or facebook.com/Hooper4MP, HOOPERFORMP, or through my Twitter account, which is twitter.com/StuartJHooper. And yeah, I do have a few leaflets left over, so if anybody does want to help spread them around in the final days leading up to the election, that would be great.
I can imagine that you're planning to do meet and greet as the commuters get on the commuter rail in the morning to go into London and everything. You're going to be there shaking their hands, and when they get off the train in the afternoon, and similar things, right? That you're going to be a constant presence in the streets of the constituency.
Yeah, just trying to get as many leaflets out to people personally as possible. So that's hopefully going to be the way forward.
Okay, so with this wind blowing that I mentioned, if even the Wall Street Journal knows that the existing big parties have struck out, I guess the only thing that remains for us is to stress that the small ones have also struck out, right? With their this dishonest position they have on austerity, right? Some of them say energy austerity, some of them say fiscal, but some kind of austerity is always there, except in your case. So best of luck, and we're going to be rooting for you on Thursday. But in the meantime, we want to see what we can do to get you a little bit more publicity. See you next week, Stuart. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Now we have another fascinating election campaign struggle going on, and this one is in Northeast Pennsylvania. As you recall, Monroe County, the area of the Poconos, the area of the Delaware Water Gap. It's to some degree a dormitory suburb of New York City, but the Lackawanna Railroad is not what it used to be. It's practically non-existent, but we want to revive it. And the guy who's going to do that is County Commissioner Adam Rodriguez, running as a Democrat in an election before the end of May. And Adam, help me out. Your election is on the
May 19th. May
19th. And now at this phase in the campaign, everything depends on a couple of $1,000s in order to be able to put out a mailer. And I've seen this. The mayoral election in one city here in Maryland in recent years was decided by a last-minute mailer that went out. So this stuff can be very powerful in these elections. So we want you to start thinking now about how you can help Adam Rodriguez with contributions which in the presidential realm would be microscopic, but in this case they would make all the difference, and you'd actually have an elected official devoted to the American system. So Adam, tell us first of all how people can help.
Well, thank you very much, Webster. Just to get down to it really quickly, it's all about basically 1,500 to 2,000 votes. And Monroe County has a voter base of about 90,000 people roughly, 48,000 of which are Democrats, but in municipal elections it's hard to get them out. So I'm planning on doing a mailer to a very targeted list of Democrats that come out. They come out to vote within the past 40 years in both the primary and the general election. So these are people that are going to be motivated to come out. They're going to be motivated by the message that I send across in my mailer, and obviously it'll have double-sided. It'll be a postcard, and we're planning on having a picture of myself, a picture of my family on the back, some very pertinent information about my campaign and what my platform issues are, issues that are focused centrally on us developing a system of very high productive powers here in the county, using every single available resource, and that includes pushing up upon local elected officials to put money into the county here from the state and federal level. And if it means having to go and make a national bank in order to do it, well, then I'll leave that up to you guys, because until I get to the federal level, I can't agitate for that. I can only push. So the mailer itself is going to be about, again, 4,000 doors it's supposed to go out to. It's going to cost maybe about $1,700, $1,600. We're going to do the bulk mail rate ourselves. The county party has been nice enough to let us use that. We're going to send it out using the bulk mail rate. The printing itself costs about $500, but all I really need from every single one of your listeners is to go to adamforcommissioner.com, AdamForCommissioner.com. Click on my PayPal button and donate $10. Donate $5. If every single listener from Webster's program does that, we'll have probably, I would say maybe at least $2,000, maybe $3,000 in the span of 3 or 4 days, and that's what this is going to have to take. I need at least another $2,000, $1,500 within the next 3 or 4 days in order to get to the printer with the product, with the postcard, have it printed, rush printed, then come back and send it out so that it's sent out in enough time that it's out there a week or two before the primary, so people can have it in their hands and say, this is somebody that I want to vote for. Okay. Now, just to give you a little bit of a review.
Maybe before we go on, let me just try to underline that. Think about that, right? The price of a trip to Starbucks.
Yep.
You could actually begin to change things in the United States, right? You could actually have a Hamiltonian, Henry Clay, American system candidate in public office doing things and doing things that would be pilot projects, that would be models that could be imitated in thousands of counties, right?
That's
so
right.
I really urge people to think about that, right? Think about maybe you don't go to Starbucks, right? I can tell you how to make better espresso at home with with ingredients you may already have, right? Rather than this overpriced Starbucks, which is outrageous.
Sure.
So please, sorry, I just wanted to
that's no problem.
Put that in perspective.
No, really, I think it's important to do it because this is a very realistic possibility for me to become elected. There's 4 people in the election. It's a 4-cornered primary. The other 2 candidates, quite frankly, are really not even qualified. They've been essentially drug up by the Republicans just to run against me and my running mate Andre Reams. He's a friend. He's a good person. He's a good Democrat. He's got very progressive values, and I'm enjoying running with him and going out and campaigning with him. But going out and speaking the message of the idea of the American system, it's great because you catch people off guard. People really, for the most part, have lost this idea of what it means to use public credit for projects of great infrastructure. And then I always pose it from the standpoint of this is what motivates me. Everything that's happening now, everything that's happened since the 2008 collapse when all those banks should have been put through bankruptcy organization and we had a national bank, everything that's happened since then should have never happened. We should be in the 7th or 8th year of a great phase moving forward with massive infrastructure development, but unfortunately that wasn't done. So that leaves me fighting for those issues, fighting for the cause, and girding ourselves against another inevitable collapse, which you and I, Webster, both know is going to happen at some point either way. It's just how we prepare ourselves for that time and have the proper power structure in place, the proper leadership in place, be it at the state, federal, or even municipal level that understands these things so that when the turn happens, we can be there to assist us and demand these things because that's what needs to happen. You were mentioning last week in Donetsk, look what it takes for a nation to realize its sovereignty, full out on civil war. We don't have to have that here. We don't, and God forbid we did. But why can't we go back into our history and turn around right away and demand these things from a Federal Reserve that's going to open up its credit window to do these projects? I have a number of projects out here right now. I got the Broadhead Creek Water Authority. Its systems are being overburdened. They need funding. We've got all kinds of roads and bridges out here that are just yearning to be developed. We've got and maintained. We've got, again, going back to the dam over here, that should have been built back in the 1930s. When I talk about that, people start to scratch their heads, especially the old-timers. They go, yeah, I remember that. Well, I remember it too, and I want to honor that. I want to honor all those farmers that were kicked off their property and took that land and made it into a national park. Yeah, it's a beautiful park, but think about how much more productive it would have been if they'd taken that Delaware River and dammed it and prevented all the loss of life and all the damage, $50 to $100 billion in damages. Just think of all that, and we would have had a good source of cheap hydroelectric power, and then you run Route 80 right across the thing, and you run rail right across the thing, and then the Obama administration wouldn't have to think about making the I-78 route down through Allentown, then on through Pittsburgh. They should have came through this area where there's still a lot of natural resources that still need to be mined. You've got anthracite coal in this area. We need to have freight. We need to have passenger rail coming through the gap. That should have been done years ago. So I plan on upholding that legacy. And then, obviously, imagine the halo effect you would see. Imagine the multiplier effect you would see in the local economy. All types of businesses springing up. All types of opportunities for people to have their own business and create less and less opportunity for large corporations to create monopolies. And that's what the American system is based upon, a division of labor. Constantly creating more and more, higher and higher forms of energy production for more divisions of labor.
All right. The website is adamforcommissioner.com, adamforcommissioner.com. Please, during this weekend, $5, $10, $20 from everybody, and we can get this mailer out and maybe elect an elected official. Adam, we'll talk to you next week. See you soon. All right, our last segment here on May 1st, International Labor Day, and we do represent the labor movement here. Unfortunately, it is in eclipse. The leadership is largely defeatist or otherwise shows the corrosive effects of many decades of defeat. However, I would also point out, let's just mention one thing from the Washington Post in recent days. We had Harold Meyerson, who was their sort of the furthest left of any of their candidates, talks about meeting with a delegation of 8 leaders from the German IG Metall metalworkers union. And the problem with that is IG Metall, I know the opposition in the United Auto Workers, the groups around Victor Reuther, Walter Reuther's brother, they put the IG Metall on a pedestal as a great model. But I'm afraid there are problems which Harold Meyerson does not mention. Right? There are certain things where they've been able to hold on, but at a price. You have to remember the Hartz system, HARTZ. This is not birdseed or the Hartz Mountain Canaries. This is, and it's not the mountains. It's a guy called Hartz, who was the personnel director of Volkswagen, right, where there's now been a leadership struggle going on. But the Hartz 4 system, as we have it now, relegates really 10 million Germans to a kind of human scrap heap where they're kept, they get a token payment to keep them quiet, and then from time to time they have to take any job they are offered. The decline of the German economy has been tremendous, and it goes together with Merkel's strategy, which was pointed up in a recent article by Professor Davidow of Brussels, that one of the things happening in this Ukrainian crisis is that Merkel wants a pool or reserve of cheap labor, kind of a sweatshop area very close by in Poland and in some other parts of Eastern Europe. And the flip side of that is that you've got these 10 million Germans in Germany who are kept, they're just sort of kept alive, maintained on the Hartz 4 system. So I'm afraid this also will not do. And Harold Meyerson is obviously against the Trans-Pacific Partnership. But again, there are 3 phases here, people. One is against fast track. Of course, against fast track. What are you going to do? Pass a secret law that nobody's been able to read? If Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are really what they say they are, they should go and photocopy some of the most explosive provisions of this free trade bill and publish those and get the thing blocked in that way, right? Make it too smelly for anybody to vote for, even a Republican. So no fast track. No bill. We don't need any more of these areas. We need to roll back the ones we have. And the way to do that is third, the 15% protective tariff. And I challenge Elizabeth Warren and I challenge Bernie Sanders. A modest tariff. In the old days, this would have been a revenue tariff. Believe me. Protective means 30, 40, 50. We're not even asking for that. We're asking for what today would be a protective tariff, even though in the old days it would have been a purely revenue tariff. So let's hear that from Harold Meyerson. It looks like here in the Washington Post we've got Dana Milbank of Skull and Bones debating Harold Meyerson about how to protect the working class. This is not such a great situation. So again, protectionism is a great thing. Lincoln was a protectionist. Henry Clay was a protectionist. Hamilton was as much as he could be, given the power relations of the time, and so on down the line. Now, the other thing about these candidates is how they all agree. Some of them are supposedly more radical, but some of them are not. Bernie Sanders, the first thing he talks about is campaign finance reform. I'm sorry, campaign finance reform is a petty bourgeois process reform, and if you want to reform the political system, you must have some goal in mind. Why not go directly to that goal and leave out this tremendously exhausting and complex and expensive intermediate stage, right? There are a lot of people who will say, I want to tax Wall Street and get some benefit, who would not be interested in campaign finance reform. Hillary, what's Hillary's trademark now? The only concrete measure that I've seen her propose is a constitutional amendment to ban to limit campaign, or she says unaccountable funds in campaign finance. And then we had Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks coming on one of these programs, and he's very radical, he thinks, and he's much more radical than Hillary. He says Hillary has sold out to Wall Street. It's true. But Cenk, what are you offering? Oh, campaign finance reform. This is a petty bourgeois, mentally impaired, so-called pseudo-opposition. And that goes for Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and Cenk Uygur and Hillary Clinton, of course. They all essentially want slightly differentiated versions of the same thing. So that's not good. Let me just remind you now, we had been hoping for Reverend Edward Pinckney, political prisoner held in the Rick Snyder Gulag Archipelago out there in Michigan. Unfortunately, it looks like the warden, right, the captors of our friend Reverend Pinckney have not allowed him to get to the telephone. So let's do the basic appeal for him. He's got to do now the full appeal, because it looks like the attempt to try to get some justice based on the obvious, what can we say, perjury during the voir dire of the jury selection. This is not going to be entertained by Judge Sterling Schrock. So it's going to be a longer process. The first necessity, of course, the transcript of the original trial has got to be turned into a text, readable paper text. So please go to BH Banco. That is BH Banco, Benton Harbor, BANCO, Benton Harbor Black Autonomy Network of Community Organizations. And as you look at the page, on the lower right-hand side of the page, you see Donate Quickly with PayPal, and that goes to the Central Coordinating Committee, including Larry Pinckney that you've heard, and including Nyla Walls, who you've also heard on this program. So that's the Pinckney Defense Committee, and I urge you to do whatever you can in that regard. I realize we have a lot of causes, but the world is in bad shape, and I urge you to think, you can't take it with you, and it's good to use money to change the world. Right? Do something, get some bang for the buck out of your money by affecting some actual political change. That is what we're trying to do, and obviously the bang for the buck here is much greater, because it's not going to be wasted on luxurious campaign headquarters or anything of the kind. Let me also repeat for Adam Rodriguez that you just heard. His site is the Adam for Commissioner, ADAMFOR Commissioner.com, all lowercase, all together, no dots, no spaces, no underscores, no nothing. And again, for the price of a trip to Starbucks coffee or not, we can actually get somebody as an actual contender and maybe get him elected. And that would be a great thing. That would be a watershed, just the kind of thing you want to have in an off year as you're getting ready. And again, going back to that question, whether Bernie will be able to drag Hillary, well, that's going to depend on who's dragging Bernie. So we plan to devote a lot of attention to the question of how to drag Bernie so that he can drag Hillary. And we'll be seeing you next week on World Crisis Radio. Happy Victory Day, and we'll see you soon.